Picture a child sitting at the edge of a room, not playing, not crying, just watching. Their faces calm, their hands are folded. They have learned something the adults around them do not say aloud, but communicate in every glance, every sigh, every moment of approval or withdrawal. They have learned that love is not automatic. It must be earned, protected, maintained. And the way you do that is by being good. Not good in the way joy makes you good, laughing too loud, asking too many questions, needing too much attention. Good in the way fear makes you good, quiet, useful, easy to manage, never a burden. You may have been that child, or you may have become that adult, the one who says yes when you mean no, who smooths over conflict, who feels guilty for taking up space, who wonders why intimacy feels like performance and rest feels like waiting for the other shoe to drop. Tonight, we are going to sit with the work of Donald Winnicott, a British pediatrician and psychoanalyst who spent decades watching children and mothers in his London clinic. What he saw was not a theory. It was a pattern. He noticed that some children learned very early to split themselves in two: the self that felt real, spontaneous, needy, angry, alive, and the self that felt safe, compliant, pleasant, adaptive, invisible. Winnicott called the second one the false self. Not because it was fake, but because it was built for survival, not for living. And here is the quiet tragedy he uncovered. The false self works. It keeps you safe. It earns approval. It prevents abandonment. But over time, the mask you wore to survive becomes the face you forget you are wearing. And one day, you wake up exhausted, not from doing too much, but from being someone you are not. By the end of tonight, something may shift. Not a solution, not a fix, just a recognition that the tiredness you carry is not laziness. It is the weight of living at a distance from yourself. And perhaps tonight we can set that weight down gently and see what remains. Let your body settle where it is. There is nothing to solve right now, just a story to hear, a pattern to notice, and a question that has been waiting quietly for years. What would it feel like to stop being good and start being real? Chapter 2: Why Survival Becomes. Personality Winnicott did not work in a laboratory. He worked in a pediatric clinic in post-war London, seeing mothers and infants week after week. And what he noticed was this: some babies were held in a way that let them remain themselves. And some babies learned very quickly to become what the world needed them to be. The difference was subtle, almost invisible. It was not abuse. It was not neglect in the dramatic sense. It was something quieter. A mother who could not tolerate her baby's crying because her own nervous system could not bear distress. A father who smiled only when the child was amusing and withdrew when the child was needy. A household where emotional expression was met with silence or scolding or the slow erosion of presence. And the child, without words, without conscious thought, began to learn. If I cry too much, I lose you. If I need too much, you disappear. If I show my anger, you turn cold. So the child made a bargain. I will become easy, pleasant, self-sufficient. I will not burden you with my realness, and in return, you will stay. This was not a choice. It was survival. Winnicott understood that what looks like personality is often just frozen adaptation. The quiet child who never asks for help. The responsible one who takes care of everyone else. The cheerful person who never shows pain. These are not innate traits. They are roles that were rehearsed so early, for so long, that they hardened into identity. And here is what makes this so difficult to see. The false self works so well that everyone praises it. You become the reliable one, the mature one, the one who has it all together. And somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispers, "But who would I be if I stopped performing?" You might recognize this in yourself, not as a memory, as a sensation. The tightness in your chest when someone asks what you need. The guilt that floods in when you say no. The exhaustion that arrives not after activity, but after an entire day of being who others expect you to be. Winnicott saw this pattern again and again, and he gave it a name. Not to shame anyone, but to make the invisible visible. Because once you see the mask, you can begin to ask, what is beneath it? Chapter 3. The first holding environment. Before language, before memory, before the idea of self, there is only sensation, warmth, hunger, comfort, distress. The infant does not yet know where their body ends and the world begins. They are not a separate person yet. They are a bundle of need, floating in an ocean of care. Winnicott called this earliest relationship the holding environment. Not just the physical act of holding, though that matters, but the psychological space where a child's existence is met, recognized, and survived. The mother, or whoever is doing the primary caregiving, becomes the baby's entire world. Her face is the mirror. Her arms are safety. Her nervous system regulates the baby's nervous system. When she is calm, the baby feels the world is safe. When she is anxious, distracted, or overwhelmed, the baby feels the world is chaotic. This is not the mother's fault. Winnicott was clear about this. He did not blame mothers. He simply noticed what happens when the holding environment fails, not catastrophically, but subtly. When the baby cries and no one comes. When the baby reaches, and the face that looks back is blank, preoccupied, or conditional. When care arrives, but it arrives on the caregiver's schedule, not the baby's need. The baby cannot think, cannot reason, cannot understand, but the body records everything, and slowly the baby begins to learn. I must adapt. I must become less of a burden. I must shape myself into someone the world can tolerate. This adaptation happens below consciousness. It is written into the nervous system. And years later, when you are 47 or 55 or 63, lying awake at night, wondering why you feel so tired all the time, this is why. You have been holding yourself together since before you had words. You learned to be your own holding environment, because the one you needed was not quite there. Let your breath slow for a moment. Feel the weight of your own body. You do not need to fix this tonight. Just notice. The child who had to become their own caregiver is still inside you. And maybe tonight you can hold them the way they needed to be held back then. Chapter 4. Dependence before language. There is a phase in infancy that Winnicott called absolute dependence. The baby cannot do anything for themselves, cannot feed, cannot soothe, cannot regulate temperature or emotion or terror. They are entirely, utterly, helplessly dependent on another person. This is not a flaw. It is the design. Human infants are born unfinished. And for the first months of life, survival requires that someone else functions as their external nervous system, their external sense of safety, their external world. When this works well, the baby does not know they are dependent. They simply exist. Fed when hungry, soothed when distressed, held when frightened. And because their needs are met reliably enough, they begin to develop something Winnicott called the capacity to be, not to do, not to perform, not to earn, just to be, to exist without terror, to feel real without justification. But when care is inconsistent, unpredictable, or emotionally absent, even if the basics are met, the baby cannot rest into dependence. They must stay alert. They must monitor the caregiver's face, voice, mood. They must learn to suppress needs that provoke withdrawal. And here is where the false self begins, not as a personality, as a survival mechanism. The baby learns to become attuned not to their own signals, hunger, tiredness, fear, but to the caregiver's signals. They learn to smile when the mother needs cheering, to stay quiet when the father is irritable, to become small, undemanding, invisible. This is not conscious manipulation. It is pre-verbal adaptation, the body learning to survive in an environment that feels unsafe. And the cost is this: The child loses connection to their own inner experience. They do not learn what they feel. They learn what they should feel to keep the world stable. You may recognize this in yourself, not as a memory of infancy, those are gone, but as a pattern in adulthood. The way you check someone's face before you speak. The way you edit your feelings in real time. The way you ask, "Are you okay?" when you are the one who is struggling. The way you prioritize everyone's comfort except your own. This is not kindness. It is the residue of dependence that was not safe enough, and the body has never forgotten. Notice where your body is tense right now. Your jaw, your shoulders, your hands. That tension is vigilance. The child who could not rest is still watching, still waiting to see if the world is safe. You can soften that vigilance tonight. Not forever, just for now. Chapter 5. When Care Feels. Conditional Winnicott did not ask for perfect mothers. He asked for good enough mothers. The difference is everything. A perfect mother would anticipate every need before the baby felt it. The baby would never cry, never wait, never experience frustration. And this, Winnicott said, would be a disaster. Because the baby would never learn that they can survive a moment of discomfort, that they can signal, wait briefly, and be met, that the world does not collapse when they need something. A good enough mother is present most of the time. She misses cues sometimes, gets it wrong sometimes, is tired, distracted, human, but she repairs, she returns. She is consistent enough that the baby can trust, and in that trust, the baby develops a self. But when care is conditional, when love arrives only if you are quiet, or cheerful, or convenient, the baby learns something else. I am acceptable only when I am not myself. This is not taught through words. It is taught through micro-withdrawals. The mother who lights up when the baby smiles and goes flat when the baby cries. The father who engages during playtime and vanishes during meltdowns. The caregiver who is warm when things are easy and cold when things are hard. The baby cannot say, "I feel unsafe," but the body knows, and the body begins to shape itself around that unsafety. The crying stops too soon. The needs become muted. The child becomes helpful, pleasant, low maintenance, and everyone says, "What an easy baby." But Winnicott would look at that easy baby and wonder, what did they have to give up to become easy? You may have been praised your whole life for being easy, for not making waves, for not needing too much, for being mature beyond your years. And beneath that praise, a quiet exhaustion. Because being easy is not restful. It is constant self-monitoring. It is scanning for what is wanted and delivering it before anyone has to ask. It is living one step removed from your own experience. Tonight, you do not have to be easy. The world will not collapse if you simply exist. Messy, tired, uncertain, real. Let that land gently. You were never supposed to earn your place here. Chapter 6. Attachment and Early Adaptation. In the 1950s, another researcher named John Bowlby was studying attachment. He and Winnicott knew each other, respected each other, but Winnicott focused on something Bowlby did not just whether the child was attached, but what the child had to do to maintain that attachment. Some children could cry, rage, demand, and still be held. Their attachment was secure. Their caregivers could tolerate the full range of their emotional life. But other children learned quickly that certain feelings were not welcome. Anger made the parent withdraw. Sadness made the parent uncomfortable. Neediness made the parent irritated. So the child adapted. They learned to hide anger, to suppress sadness, to minimize need. And on the surface, this looked like secure attachment. The child stayed close. The child complied. The child seemed fine, but beneath that compliance, Winnicott saw something else, a buried self. The part of the child that was real, spontaneous, messy, alive, had been exiled, not erased, just hidden, waiting for a world safe enough to come out. This is the difference between connection and compliance. Connection means you can be yourself and still be loved. Compliance means you can be loved only if you are not yourself. And here is the pattern that follows people into adulthood. They form relationships where they are valued for being low maintenance. They are the partner who never complains, the friend who always listens, but never needs to be heard, the colleague who takes on extra work without protest. And they feel proud of this, virtuous even, because they were trained to believe that love is earned through service. But Winnicott would gently ask, when was the last time you let someone see you struggle? When was the last time you asked for help without apologizing? When was the last time you said, "I need you," without softening it into a joke? If those questions feel uncomfortable, not because you are private, but because they feel dangerous, that is the false self protecting you. And it has protected you so well for so long that you do not remember what you are being protected from. But the body remembers. Feel your heartbeat right now. Notice if it quickens when you imagine letting someone see your need. That quickening is the child who learned that need equals abandonment. And tonight, you can tell that child something they never heard. Your need is not too much. It was never too much. The world just was not ready to hold it. Chapter 7. The Birth of Compliance. Compliance begins in silence. No, one announces it. No one names it. No one says, "From now on, you will prioritize my comfort over your own realness." But the child learns through 1,000 tiny interactions. The toddler reaches for the parent's attention during a phone call. The parent's face tightens. A hand waves them away. The message, "Your need is an interruption." The young child runs to the parent after a fall, crying. The parent says, "You're fine. It's not that bad." The message, "Your pain is not valid." The teenager expresses frustration with a rule. The parent says, "Don't you dare raise your voice in this house." The message, "Your anger is unacceptable." None of these moments are catastrophic. Most parents do these things sometimes. But when the pattern is consistent, when the child learns that their emotional truth is routinely dismissed, minimized, or punished, they stop bringing it forward. Not consciously. The body makes the decision it is safer to go numb than to keep feeling and being rejected. It is safer to become compliant than to keep reaching and being turned away. And so the child learns to perform. They learn to say, "I'm fine," when they are not fine. They learn to laugh at jokes that are not funny. They learn to agree with opinions they do not hold. They learn to disappear into the background and call it maturity. And here is the strange part. Compliance is rewarded. Teachers love compliant children. Employers love compliant workers. Partners often love compliant spouses. Because compliant people do not make waves, do not challenge, do not require emotional labor. They are easy to be around. But Winnicott understood that ease is not the same as health. A compliant person is not at peace. They are managing a constant internal calculus. What does this person need from me? How do I avoid conflict? What version of myself will keep this interaction smooth? And that calculus is exhausting. You may have called this people-pleasing or being considerate or just keeping the peace. But beneath those words, there is often a deeper truth. You are terrified of what happens if you stop performing, because the child in you learned that your real self was not welcome, and that child is still waiting for permission to exist without editing. Let your jaw soften, your shoulders drop. You do not need to perform for the darkness. The night does not grade you, does not judge you, does not need you to be anything other than here. And maybe that is enough for tonight. Chapter 8. How the False Self forms. The false self is not built in one moment. It is built in 10,000 moments. Each time, the child's realness is met with discomfort. The child files that information away. Crying upsets people. Stop crying. Anger makes people leave. Hide anger. Neediness is a burden. Minimize need. And slowly, layer by layer, a secondary self begins to form. This self is not fake. It is functional. It knows how to navigate the world, how to earn approval, how to stay safe. Winnicott called it the false self because it serves compliance, not aliveness. It is the self that knows what to say at a dinner party, the self that can hold a job, maintain a relationship, function in society. But beneath that functioning self is another one, the true self, the part of you that feels spontaneous, unguarded, alive, the part that wants to play, to rest, to say no, to need, to be imperfect, the part that existed before you learned to perform. When the false self is dominant, life feels like acting. You go through the motions. You do what is expected. You are admired for your reliability. But there is an emptiness at the center, a feeling that you are living someone else's life, that if people really knew you, not the polished version, but the messy, uncertain, angry, scared version, they would leave. And so you keep performing, not because you want to, because you are terrified of what happens if you stop. Winnicott saw this in his patients. Successful people, functional people, people who looked fine from the outside, but who came to therapy with the same quiet complaint. I feel like a fraud. I don't know who I am anymore. I'm exhausted and I don't know why. And what Winnicott understood was this. The exhaustion was not from doing too much. It was from being someone they were not. The false self requires constant vigilance. You must monitor your face, your tone, your responses. You must suppress inconvenient feelings in real time. You must anticipate what others need before they ask. And that vigilance burns energy that was meant for living. You may recognize this not as a theory, as your daily life. The smile you put on when you walk into a room, even if you feel empty inside. The "I'm fine" you deliver automatically when someone asks how you are. The way you find yourself saying yes when every fiber of your being wants to say no. That is the false self at work. And it has kept you safe for so long. But tonight, let us ask a different question. What would it feel like to stop performing? Not forever, not in every relationship, just here, just now, in the privacy of the dark, to let the mask rest for a moment and see what remains. Chapter 9, The Smile That Protects. There is a smile that comes from joy, and there is a smile that comes from fear. Winnicott could tell the difference. The joyful smile is spontaneous. It lights up the whole face. It arrives unbidden and fades naturally. The protective smile is careful. It is deployed. It manages the other person's comfort, and the person wearing it often does not realize they are doing it. It becomes automatic, a reflex that activates whenever social interaction begins. You walk into a room. The smile clicks on. Someone asks how you are. The smile stays in place. Good, thanks. Even if you are not good, even if you are drowning, the smile has become a barrier between you and the world. Not to keep the world out, to keep yourself in. Because the child in you learned that your real face, the sad one, the angry one, the exhausted one, was too much for people to handle. So you learned to manage their discomfort by hiding your own. And the smile became your costume, your shield, your social survival tool. Winnicott did not judge this. He understood that the false self was brilliant in its way. It solved the problem of how to stay attached to people who could not tolerate your full humanity. But brilliance does not mean health. And over time, the smile begins to cost you, because you start to lose track of what you actually feel. The smile becomes so automatic that you wear it even when you are alone. You might catch yourself in a mirror and realize you are smiling for no reason. Or you might notice that when someone asks a genuine question, "How are you really doing?" you do not know how to answer. Not because you are hiding, but because you have lost access to the unsmiling self, the one who is tired, sad, angry, uncertain, the one who does not have it together. The smile has become a wall between you and your own inner life. And Winnicott would say, gently, that wall is costing you your aliveness. Because aliveness requires access to the full range of feeling. Not just the socially acceptable ones, not just the ones that make other people comfortable, but all of it. The frustration, the disappointment, the grief, the rage. Those feelings are not flaws, they are signals. And when you spend your life smiling over them, you lose the ability to hear what they are trying to tell you. Tonight, let the smile drop. Not in a dramatic way, just gently. Let your face be neutral, tired, whatever it actually is. No one is watching. No one needs you to manage their comfort. And maybe, in the softness of that unsmiling moment, you will feel something you have not felt in a long time. Relief. Chapter 10. Perfectionism as attachment. Strategy perfectionism is not about wanting to do things well. It is about being terrified of being seen as inadequate. Winnicott understood this. He saw that children who grew up with conditional love often became perfectionistic adults. Not because they loved excellence, but because they learned that love was contingent on performance. If I get straight A's, I am worthy. If I am helpful, I am valuable. If I never make mistakes, I am safe. And so the child becomes the overachiever, the responsible one, the one who never asks for help, the one who takes care of everyone else. And everyone praises them. You are so mature for your age. You make it look so easy. I don't know what I would do without you, but Beneath that praise, the child is terrified because they know the truth. They are not actually that competent, that strong, that put together. They are performing. And if they stop performing, if they slip, if they fail, if they show weakness, they believe the love will vanish. This belief does not fade with adulthood. It calcifies. The adult perfectionist works harder than anyone else, takes on more responsibility, delivers flawless results, never complains, and from the outside they look successful. Impressive even, but from the inside they are exhausted. Because perfectionism is not a personality trait, it is an attachment strategy. It is the false self saying, if I am useful enough, indispensable enough, flawless enough, then maybe I will be allowed to stay. But here is the trap Winnicott identified. Perfectionism ensures that you are never truly known, because the version of you that people see is the polished, high-functioning, never-fails version, not the real you, the one who is tired, who makes mistakes, who sometimes has no idea what they are doing. And so, even when you are surrounded by people, you feel alone, because nobody sees you. They see your performance. And deep down, you believe that if they saw the real you, the uncertain, flawed, struggling you, they would leave. So you keep performing, and the exhaustion deepens. You might recognize this pattern in your own life, the way you cannot delegate because it is easier to just do it. Myself. The way you apologize for things that are not your fault. The way you stay up late finishing something that could wait until tomorrow. The way you feel guilty for resting. The way you check your work 3 times. Even when you know it is fine, that is not diligence. That is terror. The terror of being seen as less than perfect. Because perfect is the only version of you that feels safe. But Winnicott would gently remind you, perfect is not real, and the people who love the perfect version of you are not loving you. They are loving your performance. And you will never feel truly held until you let someone see you fail, struggle, and stay anyway. Let your breath slow. You do not need to be perfect tonight. You do not need to impress the darkness. You are allowed to be tired, uncertain, imperfect, and still worthy of rest. Chapter 11. Anxiety beneath goodness. Anxiety is not always loud. Sometimes it is the hum beneath your daily life, the constant low-grade vigilance that you do not even notice anymore. Winnicott saw this in the good children, the ones who never got in trouble, never talked back, never made a scene. They seemed calm, adjusted, secure. But beneath that calm, there was often a quiet terror. The terror of disappointing someone, of being too much, of being abandoned. And so the child learned to be hypervigilant, to read faces, to anticipate needs, to manage emotional temperatures in the room, and that vigilance became anxiety, Not the panic attack kind, the functional kind, the kind that keeps you scanning every conversation for signs of disapproval, the kind that makes you replay interactions in your head for hours, analyzing what you said, how you said it, whether you were too much or not enough. The kind that wakes you up at 3 a.m. with a vague sense of dread that you cannot name. This is what Winnicott meant when he talked about the cost of the false self. It is not just that you lose touch with who you are, it is that you are never truly at rest. Because the false self requires constant maintenance. You must monitor, adjust, perform. And when you finally stop, when the day ends, the responsibilities are done, and you are alone in the dark. The anxiety that you have been managing all day floods in, not because anything is wrong, but because your nervous system has been in a low-level state of threat for so long that it does not know how to relax. You may have been told you have generalized anxiety disorder or that you are just a worrier. But Winnicott would ask a different question. What if your anxiety is not a disorder? What if it is the natural result of spending your entire life trying to be someone you are not? The body knows when you are performing, and the body never fully relaxes when it knows you are in survival mode. Because survival mode is not about danger in the external world. It is about the danger of being yourself, of letting your guard down, of showing your realness and being rejected. And so the body stays alert. Just in case you slip, just in case you need, just in case you are too much. And that alertness becomes the baseline, the hum beneath everything, the reason you feel tired even after sleeping, the reason you cannot fully enjoy good moments, the reason you are always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because the child in you learned that safety is conditional. And the condition is this: you are safe as long as you are not yourself. Tonight, let the vigilance rest. Not because you have solved anything, but because the darkness does not need you to perform. Let your body be heavy. Let your breath be slow. Let the anxiety float there if it needs to. You do not have to fix it. You do not have to understand it. You just have to let it be. And notice that even with the anxiety present, you are still here, still breathing, still safe enough. Chapter 12, The Cost to Self-Worth. Self-worth is not something you are born without. You are born with inherent worth. But then the world begins to teach you something else, that your worth must be earned, proven, maintained. And for the child with a false self, this teaching is absorbed early and completely. They learn that their value is contingent on being good, helpful, easy, impressive. And so they spend their lives trying to earn something they should have been given for free. Winnicott saw this clearly. The adults who came to him were often accomplished, functional, admired. but they felt hollow inside because all their achievements were external. They had built impressive lives, impressive careers, impressive facades, but they had no sense of internal worth, no feeling that they mattered simply because they existed. Their worth was always tied to what they did, not who they were. And so they could never rest. Because resting meant not producing, and not producing meant losing value. This is the logic of the false self. I am worthy when I am useful. I am valuable when I am needed. I am lovable when I am easy. And the moment I stop performing, the moment I am just me, without the accomplishments, without the service, without the mask, I become worthless. This is not true, but it feels true, because the child who formed the false self never learned the alternative. They never learned that they were loved for simply being, not for being good, not for being helpful, not for being impressive, just for existing. And so as adults, they keep searching for that validation externally. They work harder, achieve more, help more people, and each time they succeed, there is a brief moment of relief. See? I am worthy. But the relief does not last, because external validation can never fill an internal void. You cannot earn your way into self-worth. You can only remember it. And Winnicott spent his career trying to help people remember, that their worth was never the problem. The problem was that they were taught to doubt it. You may feel this doubt in your own life, the way you downplay your own needs, the way you apologize for existing, the way you feel guilty for taking up space, for asking for help, for saying no, the way you measure your value by your productivity, the way you feel worthless when you are not doing something useful. That is not humility. That is the residue of early adaptation. The child who learned that love was conditional is now an adult who believes worth is conditional. And the body carries that belief like a weight. Feel that weight for a moment, not to wallow in it, but to notice it. The heaviness in your chest when you think about your own value. The tightness when you imagine asking for something without apologizing. The fear when you consider resting without earning it first. That heaviness is the false self still protecting you, still telling you that you must perform to be allowed to stay. But tonight, let us try something different. What if your worth is not up for debate? What if it was never something you needed to earn? What if you were born with it, and nothing you have done or failed to do has taken it away? You do not have to believe that fully tonight. You just have to let the possibility land, and notice what your body does with it. Chapter 13. The True Self in Hiding. The true self does not disappear. It goes underground. Winnicott was clear about this. The part of you that is spontaneous, alive, real, it does not die. when the false self forms. It just learns to hide, to wait, to surface only in the safest moments. And sometimes it surfaces in dreams or in the middle of the night when your defenses are down, or in those rare moments when you are alone and no one is watching, and you feel something stir, a desire, a feeling, a thought you would never say out loud. That is the true self, still there, still waiting, still hoping that someday the world will be safe enough to come out. But here is the problem. The longer the true self stays hidden, the harder it becomes to access. You lose track of what you actually want, what you actually feel, what you actually believe. Because you have spent so long performing that the performance has become your entire reality. You do not know who you are when you are not being who others need you to be. And so even when you are alone, you feel lost, because the true self has been buried so long that you do not recognize its voice anymore. Winnicott called this the central tragedy of the false self. Not that it protects you from abandonment, but that it protects you so well that you abandon yourself. You might feel this as a vague sense of emptiness, a feeling that something is missing, but you cannot name what. Or as a restlessness, a sense that you are living the wrong life, but you do not know what the right one would look like. Or as boredom, a flatness to your days, even when you are busy, even when you are achieving things. That flatness is not depression, it is the absence of aliveness. And aliveness requires access to the true self, the part of you that feels spontaneous, playful, angry, needy, imperfect, the part of you that wants things without apologizing for wanting them, the part of you that says no without guilt, the part of you that makes mistakes and does not collapse into shame. That part is still in you. It has always been in you, but it has been in hiding for so long that you may have forgotten it exists. And the work, if we can call it work, is not to become someone new. It is to remember who you were before you learned to perform. Not the child who was reckless or uncontrolled, but the child who was simply themselves, before the world taught them that themselves was not enough. Tonight, you do not have to find that self. You do not have to excavate it or perform some grand ritual of reclamation. You just have to listen and notice. When a feeling arrives that does not fit the person you have been performing, when a desire shows up that feels selfish or inconvenient, when anger rises and you instinctively push it down, that is the true self trying to speak. And maybe, just maybe, you can let it speak a little louder tonight. Chapter 14. Spontaneity and Aliveness. Spontaneity is dangerous. At least, that is what the false self believes. Because spontaneity means not thinking before you speak, not editing before you act, not measuring whether something is appropriate or safe or acceptable. It means being immediate, unguarded, real. And for the child who learned that realness was risky, spontaneity becomes impossible. Every response is filtered, every feeling is checked, every word is rehearsed before it leaves your mouth. And what you are left with is a life that feels scripted. You go through the motions. You say the right things. You perform the right emotions. But nothing feels alive. Winnicott understood that aliveness and spontaneity are inseparable. You cannot feel fully alive if you are constantly monitoring yourself, because aliveness requires presence, and presence requires that you are actually here, not 3 steps ahead, calculating how you will be perceived. He saw this most clearly in play. Children who felt safe played freely. They made up rules, broke them, laughed, got messy, made no sense. They did not care if their play was productive or impressive. They played because it felt good. But children who did not feel safe played carefully. They followed instructions, stayed clean, made sure the adults were pleased, and their play had no joy in it. It was performance, even in play. And this pattern carried into adulthood. The adult who cannot play, cannot be silly, cannot let go, not because they are serious by nature, but because spontaneity feels dangerous. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I look foolish? What if people judge me? And so you stay controlled, careful, safe, and life becomes a series of obligations and performances. And somewhere beneath that, the true self is screaming, "Let me out, let me be messy, let me be imperfect. Let me make mistakes, let me be alive." But the false self will not allow it. Because the false self remembers what happened the last time you were spontaneous. You were shamed, or ignored, or told you were too much. And so the false self stepped in and said, "I will protect you. I will make sure that never happens again." And it has protected you so well that you no longer know what spontaneity feels like. You may notice this when you are around people who are at ease with themselves, people who laugh too loud, who say what they think, who are unapologetically themselves. And you feel a mix of admiration and envy, because some part of you wants that freedom, but another part of you is terrified of it. What if I am too much? What if I am not enough? What if I am seen and found wanting? And so you stay small, controlled, edited, and the aliveness stays buried. But tonight, let us consider something. What if spontaneity is not dangerous? What if the danger was back then, when you were small and dependent, but now, as an adult, the danger is mostly in your mind? What if the people around you could actually handle your realness? And even if some people could not, what if that is okay? What if being yourself is worth the risk of being misunderstood? You do not have to answer that tonight. You just have to feel it. The weight of spending your entire life edited, and the lightness that might exist if you let yourself be unedited. Just for a moment, let your next breath be unplanned. Let the next thought that arrives stay unfiltered. Just here, just now. No one is watching. And maybe that is where spontaneity begins. Chapter 15. The fear of need is the most vulnerable thing a human being can feel. To need someone is to admit that you are not self-sufficient, that you cannot do it alone, that you require someone else's care, attention, or presence. And for the child who learned that need was a burden, this admission feels like death. Winnicott saw this fear over and over in his practice. Adults who could give endlessly but could not receive, who could support others but would rather suffer in silence than ask for help, who felt deep shame at the thought of being needy. This was not strength, it was survival. The child who learned that their needs drove people away became an adult who no longer allows themselves to need anything. They become self-reliant to the point of isolation. They pride themselves on never asking for help, on handling everything alone, on being low maintenance. And beneath that pride, there's often profound loneliness. Because connection requires need. You cannot have intimacy without vulnerability. And you cannot have vulnerability without admitting that you need something from another person. But for the adult with a false self, need feels like weakness. It feels like proof that you are too much, too needy, too dependent, and so you minimize your needs. You tell yourself you are fine when you are not fine. You downplay pain, brush off hurt, pretend everything is manageable. And the people around you believe you because you have become so good at pretending, and so they do not offer help. Not because they do not care, but because you have trained them to believe you do not need it. And the loneliness deepens. Because you are surrounded by people who care about you, but none of them truly see you struggling, because you will not let them. Winnicott understood that this fear of need was not irrational. It was a survival response to an early environment where need was met with withdrawal, where crying led to coldness, where asking led to irritation, where dependence felt dangerous. And so the child learned to be independent too soon, to take care of themselves, to not burden anyone. And that child is now an adult who is exhausted. Because self-sufficiency is not the same as strength. Sometimes self-sufficiency is just unmet need wearing a different name. You may recognize this in yourself. The way you say, "I'm fine," automatically when someone asks. The way you deflect compliments or help with, "Oh, it's nothing." The way you feel guilty when someone does something kind for you. The way you cannot rest unless you have earned it. The way you feel uncomfortable when someone offers to take care of you. That discomfort is not independence. It is the residue of a childhood where need felt like danger, and the body still remembers. Tonight, let yourself need something, not something dramatic. Not something you have to ask for out loud, just internally. Let yourself admit, just to yourself, that you are tired, that you wish someone would notice, that you do not want to hold everything together alone. You do not have to act on this need. You just have to let it exist, without shame, without minimizing it, without telling yourself you should be stronger. Your need is not too much. It was never too much. The world just was not ready to hold it. But maybe someday you will find people who are. Chapter 16, Trauma Without Catastrophe. When people think of trauma, they think of catastrophe, abuse, neglect, violence, abandonment, and those are trauma. But Winnicott understood that there is another kind of trauma, quieter, harder to name. The trauma of being raised by people who were physically present but emotionally absent. The trauma of having your needs met on someone else's timeline, not your own. The trauma of being loved conditionally, of having to earn approval, of being praised for being easy, of learning that your feelings were inconvenient. This is not the kind of trauma that makes headlines. It is the kind that makes you question whether you are allowed to call it trauma at all, because you were not hit. You were not abandoned. You were not abused. Your parents were good people. They did their best. And so you minimize. You tell yourself it could have been worse, that you have no right to complain, that your pain is not valid because others have suffered more. But Winnicott would gently push back. He would say that trauma is not about the objective severity of what happened. It is about whether the child's emotional needs were met consistently enough for them to feel safe. And if they were not, if the child had to adapt, perform, and suppress in order to maintain attachment, then there was trauma. Not because anyone was evil, not because anyone intended harm, but because the child's true self was not welcomed. And when the true self is not welcomed, it goes into hiding. And living at a distance from yourself is its own kind of suffering. You may have spent your life telling yourself your childhood was fine, and in many ways it probably was. But here is the question Winnicott would ask. Do you feel like you can be yourself around the people who raised you? Can you express sadness without being told to cheer up? Can you express anger without being told you are overreacting? Can you ask for help without feeling like a burden? If the answer is no, if you have learned to edit yourself around the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally, then there was a wound. Not a dramatic one, but a real one. And that wound has shaped how you move through the world. It has shaped how you relate to yourself, how you relate to others, how you understand your own worth. And tonight, you are allowed to name that wound, not to blame anyone, not to make anyone wrong, but to honor the child who had to adapt in order to survive. That child did an extraordinary thing. They figured out how to stay attached to people who could not fully see them. They built a false self that was so functional, so competent, so impressive, that no one ever knew how scared they were inside. And that child deserves recognition, not pity, recognition, for surviving something that was not catastrophic, but was still too much to carry alone. Let your breath slow. Feel your body. The child who adapted is still in there, and tonight you can tell them what they needed to hear back then. You are not too much. You are not a burden. And your pain is real, even if no one saw it. Chapter 17, The Good Enough. Mother Winnicott's most famous concept is the good enough mother, not the perfect mother, the good enough mother. And the difference is everything. A perfect mother would meet every need instantly. She would never fail, never misunderstand, never be tired or distracted or human. And if such a mother existed, the child would never learn that they can survive disappointment. They would never learn that needs can be expressed, briefly frustrated, and then met. They would never develop the capacity to soothe themselves. They would remain psychologically fused to the mother, unable to develop a separate self. So Winnicott did not ask for perfection. He asked for good enough. The good enough mother is present most of the time. She responds to her baby's cries quickly enough that the baby learns to trust, but not so quickly that the baby never experiences the feeling of needing. She misreads cues sometimes, gets it wrong sometimes, is tired, distracted, imperfect. But she repairs, she comes back, she tries again. She is reliable enough that the baby can build an internal sense of safety. And in that safety, the baby begins to develop a self. Not a self built for survival, a self built for living. But when the mother is not good enough, when she is too inconsistent, too unpredictable, too conditional, the baby cannot relax into dependence. They must stay vigilant. They must monitor her face, her tone, her mood. They must adapt to her needs. instead of expressing their own, and the false self begins. Winnicott was very careful not to blame mothers. He understood that mothers are human, that they are shaped by their own childhoods, their own wounds, their own resources, that many mothers are doing the best they can with what they have. But he also understood that recognizing the pattern is not the same as assigning blame. It is simply naming what happened, so that the adult who is suffering now can understand why they feel anxious all the time, why they cannot relax, why they cannot ask for help, why they feel guilty for having needs, not because they are broken, but because the early environment taught them that their needs were dangerous and the body never forgot. You may feel complicated feelings about your own mother, love and resentment, gratitude and grief. You may tell yourself she did her best, and that may be true. But you are also allowed to acknowledge that her best was not enough for the child you were, that you needed more holding, more attunement, more permission to be yourself, and that you did not get it. Not because she was cruel, but because she was human, and her own wounds limited what she could give. This is not about making her wrong. It is about making your experience real. The child who adapted did not have a good enough mother, and that child is still waiting for the world to become good enough, to become safe enough, to become gentle enough. And maybe that is the work now, not to fix your mother, not to fix the past, but to become the good enough presence for yourself, to hold yourself the way you needed to be held back then, to allow yourself to feel without shame, to soothe yourself without criticism, to offer yourself the reliability you never received. That is not selfish. That is survival becoming healing. Chapter 18, Failures We Can Survive. Winnicott had a strange idea. He said that failure was necessary, not catastrophic failure, not trauma, but small, survivable failures. Moments when the mother does not respond immediately, when the baby cries and has to wait a few moments before being picked up, when the toddler falls and the parent does not rush in to rescue, when the child is frustrated and the parent lets them sit with the frustration briefly before helping. These are not moments of neglect. They are moments of graduated independence. The child learns. I can tolerate discomfort for a moment. I can signal my need and trust that help will come. I can survive imperfection. And in those small, survivable failures, the child begins to build resilience. Not the resilience of shutting down. Not the resilience of pretending everything is fine, but the resilience of knowing that they can feel something difficult and come through it. That they can be disappointed and not collapse. That they can need something, not get it immediately, and still be okay. This is what Winnicott meant by good enough. Not perfect, not flawless, but reliable enough that small failures do not feel catastrophic, because the child has learned that rupture is followed by repair, that frustration is followed by relief, that need is eventually met. But when the failures are too big, when the baby cries and no one comes for too long, when the child is scared and the parent is unavailable again and again, when need is met with anger or coldness or unpredictability, then failure does not teach resilience, it teaches terror. And the child learns that they cannot trust anyone to hold them through difficulty. So they learn to hold themselves, to suppress need, to manage alone, to never let themselves be vulnerable enough to be disappointed, and that pattern follows them into adulthood. They expect failure from others. They do not ask for help because they have learned that help will not come. They do not let themselves need because they believe no one will show up. And when someone does show up, when someone offers care, support, reliability, they do not know how to receive it, because they were never taught that people can fail you in small ways and still be trustworthy, that someone can misunderstand you and still love you, that relationships can be imperfect and still be safe. Winnicott saw this in his patients. Adults who either clung desperately to others, terrified of abandonment, or who kept everyone at arm's length, convinced that closeness would only lead to disappointment. And what he helped them see was this: the early failures were too big. They taught you that people are dangerous, that need is dangerous, that closeness is dangerous. But now, as an adult, you have a choice. You can begin to learn what you did not learn as a child, that small failures are survivable, that people can disappoint you without destroying you, that you can ask for help and sometimes not get it, and still be okay. That you can be seen, misunderstood, and still be yourself. This is not easy. It requires letting people fail you in small ways. It requires risking disappointment. It requires trusting again, even though trust was broken before. But Winnicott believed it was possible, not through thinking, through experience, through finding people who are good enough, not perfect, just good enough. People who show up most of the time, who repair when they get it wrong, who stay even when things are messy. And in those relationships, you can begin to heal, not by erasing the past, but by learning that the present can be different. Chapter 19. When failure comes too soon. But sometimes failure comes too soon, or too often, or without repair. And when that happens, the child does not learn resilience. They learn that the world is unsafe, that people cannot be trusted, that survival means never needing anyone. Winnicott called this the failure of the holding environment, not a one-time catastrophe, but a pattern of unreliability that teaches the child they are on their own. The baby who cries and no one comes, not once, but again and again. The toddler who falls and the parent says you're fine when they are clearly not fine. The child who expresses fear and the parent dismisses it or mocks it, the teenager who asks for help, and the parent is too busy, too stressed, too overwhelmed. None of these moments are abuse. But when they become the pattern, when the child learns that their emotional reality is routinely dismissed, then the child makes a decision, a pre-verbal, unconscious decision. I cannot rely on anyone else. I must take care of myself. And so they do. They become the responsible one, the independent one, the one who never asks for help and everyone praises them. You are so mature, so together, so strong, but beneath that strength, there is a wound. The wound of the child who had to become their own parent, who had to hold themselves through fear, pain, loneliness, because no one else would. And that child is now an adult who is exhausted. Because parenting yourself is not the same as being parented. It is not rest. It is vigilance. It is carrying yourself through every difficulty alone. It is never letting yourself fall apart because no one will catch you. And so you become hyper-capable, hyper-responsible, hyper-controlled, and you tell yourself, this is strength. But Winnicott would gently ask, what if it is not strength? What if it is unmet need that never learned it could be met? You may recognize this in yourself, the way you cannot accept help without feeling weak, the way you feel uncomfortable when someone tries to take care of you, the way you push through exhaustion because resting feels like giving up, the way you are the person everyone leans on, but you have no one to lean on yourself, not because no one offers, but because you cannot let yourself lean, because the child in you learned that leaning means falling, and no one will catch you. But here is what Winnicott understood. That belief was true once. When you were small, when you were dependent, when failure came too soon. But it is not true now. Now, as an adult, you have choices you did not have then. You can find people who are different, people who show up, who stay, who do not punish you for needing. But in order to find those people, you have to risk leaning. You have to risk asking. You have to risk letting someone see you struggle, and that risk feels enormous. Because the child in you is terrified that history will repeat itself, that you will reach and no one will be there, that you will need and be rejected, that you will lean and fall, and so you keep holding yourself up, alone, exhausted, convinced that this is the only way. But tonight, let us consider something different. What if the failure that came too soon does not have to define the rest of your life? What if you could learn, slowly, carefully, to let someone else hold you, not all at once, not without fear, but gradually, one small lean at a time, and notice that the sky does not fall. Chapter 20, Transitional Objects at Night. Winnicott noticed something about children and their teddy bears, or their blankets, or their favorite toy. The child clutched the object at night, slept with it, refused to be without it. And if you asked the child, "Is this bear real?" they would not answer clearly, because the bear existed in a space between fantasy and reality. It was not alive. But it was not quite just an object either. Winnicott called these transitional objects, objects that helped the child bridge the gap between total dependence on the mother and growing independence. The child could not yet soothe themselves fully, but they could not bring their mother into bed with them every night. So they found something in between. The teddy bear carried the mother's comfort, but it was under the child's control. They could hold it when they needed, release it when they did not. It was theirs. And in that small act of holding something soft in the dark, the child learned to comfort themselves. Winnicott saw this as healthy. The transitional object was not a sign of weakness or regression. It was a sign of development. The child was learning to manage their own emotional world. But here is what he also noticed. Some adults never developed beyond the transitional object. Not literally. They did not carry teddy bears into adulthood, but they carried the pattern. They needed something external to soothe them. Alcohol, work, busyness, relationships, screens. Not because they loved these things, but because they never learned to soothe themselves from the inside. The mother was not reliable enough for them to internalize her comfort. So they kept searching for it outside themselves, and what they found was never quite enough, because no external object can replace an internal sense of safety. You may recognize this in yourself, the way you reach for your phone the moment you feel uncomfortable, the way you fill every moment of silence with noise, the way you cannot be alone without feeling anxious, the way you need someone else's approval to feel okay. That is not weakness. That is the pattern of the transitional object still active in your adult life. You are searching for something outside yourself to hold you together, because you never learned that you could hold yourself. Winnicott would not judge this. He would simply ask, what if you could become your own transitional object? What if you could learn to hold yourself in the dark? Not through an external crutch, but through internal presence, through your own breath, your own body, your own capacity to stay with yourself in discomfort. This is not about becoming self-sufficient in the brittle way. It is about becoming your own source of comfort, so that when the world fails you, and it will, because the world is imperfect, you do not collapse. You bend, but you do not break. Tonight, let yourself be the teddy bear. Let yourself be the soft thing you needed in the dark. Let your hand rest on your own chest. Feel your heartbeat. Feel your breath and notice that even without anyone else here, you are still held, not by perfection, not by control, but by your own presence. And maybe that is enough for tonight. Chapter 21. Play as emotional. Healing Winnicott believed that play was not trivial. It was essential, not play in the sense of games or competition. Play in the sense of unstructured, purposeless, imaginative engagement with the world. The child who builds a fort out of pillows. The child who talks to imaginary friends. The child who makes up stories, breaks rules, creates worlds that make no sense. This is not wasted time. This is how the child learns to be creative, to experiment, to take risks in a safe space. Play is where the true self lives, because in play there are no rules, no performance, no right or wrong, just spontaneity, imagination, aliveness. But the child who does not feel safe cannot play. They are too busy monitoring the adults, managing the emotional temperature, staying vigilant. And so they lose access to the part of themselves that is creative, experimental, alive. They become serious too young, responsible too young, and play becomes foreign to them. This pattern carries into adulthood. The adult who cannot play is often the adult who was forced to grow up too fast, who was parentified, who had to take care of others, who learned that fun was frivolous and responsibility was everything. And so they work hard, achieve, perform, but they do not know how to rest, how to be silly, how to do something for no reason other than joy, and life becomes a series of obligations. And the true self, the part that is spontaneous and alive, withers. Winnicott saw play as a form of healing, not play therapy in the clinical sense. Just the simple act of doing something without purpose, drawing without trying to make it good, walking without trying to get somewhere, talking without trying to make a point. These moments of purposeless engagement are where the true self comes back to life. Because in play there is no performance. No one is grading you, no one is judging you. You are simply here, engaging with the world in a way that feels alive. And for the adult who has spent their entire life performing, this can feel terrifying, because play requires letting go of control. It requires being willing to look foolish, to make mistakes, to be imperfect. And the false self cannot tolerate that. But the true self needs it. You may have noticed that you have forgotten how to play, that when someone suggests doing something just for fun, you feel uncomfortable. That every activity must have a purpose, a goal, a measurable outcome, that you cannot do anything without asking, what is this for? That is not maturity. That is the residue of a childhood where play was not safe, where you had to be useful, productive, responsible, where being playful felt dangerous. But tonight, let us reconsider. What if play is not frivolous? What if it is the pathway back to yourself? What if the part of you that knows how to laugh, how to be silly, how to do things for no reason, is the part of you that is most alive? And what if that part is still there, waiting for permission to come out, not in some grand gesture, but in small moments, a doodle, a spontaneous laugh, a walk with no destination? These are not distractions from your real life. They are your real life coming back online. Chapter 22. The Space Between. World's Winnicott had a concept he called potential space, not a physical place, a psychological space, the space between you and the world, between inner reality and outer reality, between what is imagined and what is real. This is the space where play happens, where creativity happens, where intimacy happens. It is the space where you are neither fully yourself nor fully performing, but something in between. This space only exists when you feel safe enough to be vulnerable, when you can show someone a draft of yourself and not be judged, when you can express a half-formed thought and not be dismissed, when you can need something and not be punished. But for the person with a false self, this space does not exist. There is only the performance or the hidden self. No in-between. No space where you can experiment, be imperfect, be in process. And so everything feels binary. Either I show you the perfect version of myself, or I show you nothing. Either I have it all together, or I fall apart. Either I am strong, or I am weak. There is no room for nuance, no room for complexity, no room for being human. And this is exhausting, because life is not binary. You are not either perfect or worthless. You are something in between. And that in between is where real life happens. Winnicott believed that therapy was, at its best, the creation of potential space, a place where the person could bring their unfinished self, their confusion, their contradictions, their fear, and be met with curiosity. Not judgment, not fixed, not solved, just held. And in that holding, the person could begin to explore who they were beneath the performance. You may have never experienced this space. You may have spent your entire life either hiding or performing, never in between, never letting someone see you mid-process, never admitting that you do not have it figured out, never asking for help without already having a plan. And so you have never learned what it feels like to be held in your uncertainty, to be valued not for what you accomplish, but for what you are becoming, to be loved not despite your imperfection, but including it. This is not something you can think your way into. It requires experience. It requires finding someone who can sit with you in the messiness, who does not rush in to fix you, who does not judge you, who does not need you to be more than you are, who just says, "I see you and I am here." That is potential space, and it is where healing happens, not through insight, not through willpower, but through being seen in your realness and not being abandoned. Tonight, you cannot create that space with another person, but you can create it with yourself. You can sit with the parts of you that are unfinished, the parts that are confused, scared, uncertain. And instead of rushing to fix them, you can just let them be. And notice that even in the messiness, you are still here, still breathing, still real. Chapter 23. Living from reaction. When you live from the false self, you are not living from your own center. You are living from reaction. Someone asks you a question, you scan their face before you answer. Someone expresses an emotion, you adjust yours to match or soothe. Someone sets a tone, you follow it without thinking. You are not responding from what you feel. You are responding from what you think will keep the interaction safe. And after a lifetime of this, you lose track of what you actually feel. Because you have spent so long monitoring others that you have stopped monitoring yourself. Your inner life becomes background noise, and the foreground is everyone else. Winnicott saw this clearly. The person who walks into a room and immediately starts taking care of everyone else. The person who knows what everyone needs but cannot tell you what they need. The person who is always asking, "Are you okay?" but never stops to ask themselves, this is not kindness. This is the pattern of the false self. And it is draining, because you are constantly giving from an empty well. You have nothing left for yourself because you are using all your energy to manage everyone else's emotional state. And here is the trap. People love you for this. You are the reliable one, the caretaker, the one who always knows what to do. And so you keep doing it, not because it feels good, but because it is the only way you know how to stay connected. If I stop caretaking, what am I worth? If I stop managing everyone's comfort, will they still want me? If I just show up as myself, messy, needy, uncertain, will anyone stay? And so you keep performing. And the exhaustion deepens. You may notice this pattern in your own life. The way you automatically start cleaning when someone comes over, the way you deflect attention when someone asks about you, the way you feel responsible for everyone's mood in the room, the way you cannot relax until everyone else seems okay. That is not empathy. That is hypervigilance. The nervous system learned that your safety depends on everyone else being calm. So you became the person who calms everyone else. But who calms you? Nobody, because you never learned to ask. And even if you did, you would not know what to ask for, because you have been living from reaction for so long that you do not know what your own needs are Winnicott would invite you to stop, not forever, just for a moment, to stop scanning the room, to stop monitoring faces, to stop adjusting your energy to match everyone else, and to just feel, what do I actually feel right now? Not what I should feel, not what would make this easier for others, but what is actually here, in my body, in my chest, in my gut. This is not selfish. This is the beginning of living from your own center. And it is terrifying, because the false self will whisper. If you stop reacting to them, they will leave. But maybe that is not true anymore. Maybe some people will stay even if you are not managing their comfort. Maybe some people would rather see you real than see you useful. And maybe it is time to find out. Chapter 24. The loneliness of compliance. You can be surrounded by people and still feel alone. This is the loneliness of the false self, not the loneliness of being physically isolated, but the loneliness of never being truly known. You are in the room, you are smiling, you are engaging, but the person they see is not you. It is the version of you that you have built to be acceptable, and beneath that version, the real you is alone, unseen, unheard, unfelt. Winnicott understood this loneliness as one of the deepest forms of suffering, because it is invisible. From the outside, the compliant person looks fine. They have friends, they have relationships, they are well liked. But inside, they feel like a ghost, like they are watching their own life from a distance, going through the motions, saying the right things, playing the role, but never actually present, because presence requires realness, and realness requires letting someone see you without the mask. And that feels too dangerous. So you stay behind the mask and you are praised for it. You are so easy to be around. You never cause drama. You are always so pleasant. And each compliment is a knife. Because what they are praising is not you. It is your performance. And you know it. And so the loneliness deepens. Because you are starving for connection, real connection, but you are terrified to reach for it. Because reaching means showing them the parts you have been hiding. The angry part, the needy part, the scared part, the imperfect part. And what if they leave? What if they only loved the easy version of you? What if the real you is too much, too messy, too inconvenient? And so you stay compliant, and you stay alone. You may feel this loneliness in your own life, the way you can be at a party and still feel isolated, the way you can be in a long-term relationship and still feel unseen, the way you have people who call you when they need something, but no one who just wants to sit with you in silence, the way you are always performing, even with people you have known for years. That is the loneliness of compliance. And it is exhausting, because you are both overstimulated and undernourished. You are giving constantly, but receiving nothing that actually feeds you. Because what you need is not admiration or appreciation. What you need is to be known, to have someone see you, really see you, and not look away. To have someone hold your anger without needing you to soften it. To have someone sit with your sadness without needing to fix it. To have someone witness your imperfection and say, I am still here. That is the antidote to the loneliness. Not more connection, but deeper connection. Connection that is real, not performed. And tonight, you can begin that process. Not with someone else, with yourself. You can stop performing for yourself. You can stop pretending to yourself that you are fine. You can let yourself feel the loneliness, not to wallow in it, but to acknowledge it. To say, I am lonely. Not because I am broken, but because I have been hiding for so long that no one knows me, and maybe it is time to start letting someone in. Chapter 25, The Fantasy of Being Easy There, is a fantasy that lives in the compliant person, the fantasy that if you are easy enough, if you never complain, never need, never cause trouble, then you will finally be safe. Then you will finally be loved. Then you will finally belong. And so you make yourself smaller. You edit your needs. You minimize your pain. You perform ease. And at first, it works. People do appreciate you. They do value you, they do rely on you, and you feel a brief sense of relief. See, I am acceptable. But the relief does not last, because deep down you know the truth. They do not love you. They love the easy version of you, and if you ever stop being easy, if you ever become complicated, messy, human, they will leave. This is not paranoia. This is lived experience, because you have seen what happens when you let your guard down. You expressed a need once, and someone withdrew. You got angry once, and someone called you dramatic. You cried once, and someone told you to get over it, and so you learned. The only safe version of me is the easy version, and that learning became your prison. Because now you cannot stop performing, even when you want to, even when you are exhausted, even when you are drowning, you still put on the smile. Still say, I'm fine. Still hold it together. Because the fantasy of being easy is more powerful than the reality of being real. But here is what Winnicott understood. The fantasy is a lie. You will never be safe by being easy. You will only be tolerated. And toleration is not love. Love sees you in your messiness and does not flinch. Love sees you at your worst and does not leave. Love does not require you to be convenient. But as long as you are performing ease, you will never experience love. You will only experience approval. And approval is conditional. It lasts as long as you are useful, pleasant, low maintenance. And the moment you are not, the moment you need something, or express anger, or ask for help, the approval evaporates. And you are left alone with the realization that you were never loved for who you are. You were only loved for what you provided. And that is a devastating realization, but it is also a freeing one. Because once you see the fantasy for what it is, once you see that being easy does not keep you safe, you can begin to consider another possibility. What if you stopped trying to be easy? What if you let yourself be complicated, inconvenient, human? What if you risked showing people your realness? And yes, some people will leave. Some people only wanted the easy version, and losing them will hurt. But here is what you will gain. The people who stay will be real. They will not be staying for what you provide. They will be staying for who you are. And that is the difference between approval and love. Approval says, I like you as long as you are this. Love says, I see all of you and I am still here. Tonight, you do not have to make that leap. You just have to see the fantasy that being easy will keep you safe, and notice how much it has cost you. And ask yourself quietly, is it worth it? Chapter 26. Anger beneath the pleasing child. There is anger in the compliant person. Deep, buried, unacknowledged anger, not the loud kind, not the explosive kind, but a quiet, simmering resentment that lives beneath the surface. Because when you spend your life pleasing others, suppressing your needs, and performing ease, something inside you knows that this is not fair. You give and give and give, and no one asks if you are okay. No one notices that you are exhausted. No one sees that you are drowning, because you have trained them not to see, and that is infuriating. But you cannot express that anger, because anger was not safe. Anger made people withdraw, made people cold, made people leave, and so you learned to suppress it, to smile when you were seething, to say, it's fine when it was not fine, to turn the anger inward instead of outward. And now, decades later, the anger is still there, buried but not gone, and it leaks out in small ways: passive aggression, sarcasm, silent withdrawal, or it turns into depression, exhaustion, numbness. Because when anger has nowhere to go, it either explodes or implodes, and the compliant person cannot let it explode. So it implodes, and they call it something else. They call it tiredness, or burnout, or just getting older. But beneath that tiredness is rage. Rage at the people who took and never gave. Rage at the parents who could not see them. Rage at the world that praised them for being easy and punished them for being real. Winnicott understood that this anger was not pathological. It was a sign of life. It was the true self saying, this is not okay. I deserve more than this. I deserve to be seen, to be valued, to be loved for who I am, not what I do. But the anger has been buried for so long that it feels dangerous. What if I let it out and it destroys everything? What if I let myself feel it and I cannot control it? What if I express it and people leave, and so you keep it locked down and you call that self-control? But it is not self-control. It is self-abandonment. You are abandoning your own anger because you believe it will cost you everything. But here is what Winnicott would say: your anger is not the enemy. Your anger is information. It is telling you that something needs to change, that you cannot keep giving without receiving, that you cannot keep performing without resting, that you cannot keep suppressing yourself without eventually breaking. And tonight, you do not have to act on that anger. You just have to let yourself feel it without shame, without apology. Just let it be there. The anger at your parents for not seeing you. The anger at your friends for taking you for granted. The anger at yourself for giving so much away. That anger is real, and it is valid, and it does not make you a bad person. It makes you a person who has been carrying too much for too long, and maybe it is time to set some of it down. Chapter 27. The anti-social signal Winnicott had a controversial idea. He said that sometimes when a child acts out, when they steal, lie, break things, push boundaries, it is not because they are bad. It is because they are testing to see if the world can handle their realness, testing to see if someone will stay even when they are difficult, testing to see if love is conditional or unconditional. He called this the antisocial tendency, and he saw it not as pathology, but as hope, because the child who has given up does not test. They comply. They disappear. They become perfectly easy. But the child who is still testing is still hoping. They are hoping that somewhere, someone will hold them through their worst behavior, that someone will set boundaries without withdrawing love, that someone will say, "I see you, you are struggling, and I am not going anywhere." And if that happens, if the child finds that person, they stop acting out, not because they were punished, but because they finally feel safe. But when the testing is met with punishment, rejection, or abandonment, when the child learns that their difficulty makes them unlovable, they stop testing and they become compliant. And everyone breathes a sigh of relief. They finally grew out of it. But they did not grow out of it. They buried it. And now, as an adult, the testing continues, not through stealing or lying, but through sabotage, through withdrawal, through pushing people away before they can leave, through picking fights, through shutting down, through disappearing when things get close. This is not manipulation. This is the same test. Can you handle me when I am difficult? Will you stay when I am not easy? Do you love me or do you love my performance? And most people fail the test. They withdraw. They get frustrated. They leave. And the person is left alone, convinced once again that their realness is too much. But Winnicott would say that the testing is not the problem. The problem is that the person never found someone who could pass the test, someone who could stay even when the things were hard, someone who could say, I see you pushing me away, and I am still here. That is what the antisocial tendency is searching for. Not permission to be destructive, but proof that they are lovable even when they are not perfect. You may recognize this pattern in yourself. The way you push people away when they get close. The way you pick fights right when things are going well. The way you test people by being difficult, just to see if they will stay. That is not sabotage. That is a question you have been asking since childhood. Will you stay even when I am hard to love? And most people have not stayed. And so you have learned to keep testing. Because some part of you is still hoping that someday someone will pass the test. Tonight, you do not need to stop testing. You just need to see it for what it is. Not a flaw, but a signal. A signal that you are still looking for someone who can love you unconditionally. And maybe, someday, you will find them, or maybe you will learn to be that person for yourself. Chapter 28. Testing the world for care. The testing does not stop in childhood. It follows you into adulthood, into every relationship, every friendship, every moment of intimacy, because the child in you is still asking the same question. Is it safe to be real? And the only way to find out is to test, not consciously, not strategically, but instinctively. You push a boundary, you express a need, you let your guard down slightly, and then you watch. Will they stay? Will they pull away? Will they punish me for being real? And most of the time, people fail the test. Not because they are cruel, but because they do not understand what is happening. They see your anger and take it personally. They see your need and feel overwhelmed. They see your vulnerability and do not know what to do with it. And so they withdraw, just a little, and you notice. And the child in you says, "See, I knew it. It is not safe." And you pull back, you shut down, you return to the false self, and the testing stops. Not because you feel safe, but because you have confirmed what you already believed, that your realness is too much, that people can only tolerate the easy version of you. That love is conditional, and the pattern repeats again and again, until you meet someone who understands, someone who has done their own work, someone who can sit with discomfort, someone who sees you testing and does not flinch. Someone who says, I see what you are doing, and I am still here. That is the person who can hold you through the testing, not by ignoring it. Not by pretending it is not happening, but by recognizing it for what it is. A question that has been waiting decades for an answer. You may have never found that person. You may have spent your entire life testing and failing. And so you stopped testing altogether. You became perfectly compliant, perfectly easy, perfectly safe. And you are exhausted because you are still hoping that someday someone will love you without conditions. But you cannot find that person if you never test, because testing is how you find out who is safe. And yes, most people will fail. Most people cannot handle your realness. But that does not mean no one can. It just means you have not found them yet. Or maybe you have. Maybe there is someone in your life right now who has been waiting for you to let them in, waiting for you to test them, waiting to prove that they can stay even when you are difficult. But you have been so afraid of failing the test that you have not let them try. Tonight, consider this. What if the testing is not sabotage? What if it is the only way you know how to ask for love? And what if, instead of hiding the test, you made it conscious? What if you said to someone directly, I need to know if you will stay even when I am not easy. I need to know if you can handle my realness. I need to know if this is real or if I am just performing again. That is a terrifying thing to say because it makes the test explicit. And if they fail, you cannot pretend you did not notice. But if they pass, if they say, yes, I am here, even when it is hard, then maybe, finally, the testing can stop. Because you will have found what you have been searching for all along. Chapter 29. Therapy, as Winnicott believed that therapy was not about insight. It was about holding, not physical. Holding, psychological holding. The therapist creates a space where the person can bring their unfinished self, their anger, their need, their fear, their shame, and be met with presence, not judgment. The therapist does not fix, does not advise, does not solve. They simply hold. They say, through their presence, I see you, I am here, and I am not going anywhere. And in that holding, something begins to shift. Not immediately, not dramatically, but gradually. The person begins to feel safe enough to let down the mask, to show the parts they have been hiding, to express the needs they have been suppressing, to feel the feelings they have been burying. And the therapist does not flinch, they do not withdraw, they do not judge. They do not need the person to be anything other than what they are. And that experience, the experience of being seen in your messiness and not being abandoned, is healing. not because it solves anything, but because it teaches you something you never learned. That you are acceptable even when you are not perfect. That your needs are not too much. That your anger is not dangerous. That your realness is lovable. And slowly, you begin to internalize that holding. You begin to hold yourself the way the therapist has been holding you, with patience, with compassion, with presence, and the false self begins to soften, not because you forced it, but because it is no longer needed. You have found a safe enough environment to be real, and so the real you begins to come forward. Not all at once, not without fear, but gradually, one small risk at a time, one small expression of need, one small admission of struggle, one small moment of realness, and each time the therapist is still there, still holding, still present, still saying, through their constancy, you are safe. This is what Winnicott meant by therapy. Not a place to be analyzed or corrected, but a place to be held while you figure out who you are beneath the mask. You may have never experienced this kind of holding. You may have never found someone who could sit with you in your messiness without needing to fix you, who could witness your struggle without needing you to be strong, who could hold your anger without needing you to calm down, who could see your need without needing you to be self-sufficient. And that is a loss, because that holding is how you learn to be real. But here is the other truth. You can learn to hold yourself. Not perfectly, not immediately, but gradually. You can become the presence you needed. You can sit with yourself in your messiness without judgment. You can witness your own struggle without needing to fix it immediately. You can feel your own feelings without needing them to go away. That is self-compassion. And it is not selfish. It is the opposite. It is finally giving yourself what you have been giving everyone else. Patience, presence, holding. Tonight, let yourself be held, not by another person, by your own awareness, by your own breath, by your own willingness to stay present with whatever is here. You do not need to fix anything. You just need to stay. And notice that even in the discomfort, you are still here, still breathing, still worthy of care. Chapter 30. Regression and Trust. Winnicott had another controversial idea. He said that sometimes, in therapy, the person needs to regress, not to be immature, but to go back to the developmental stage where they got stuck, where they had to adapt too early, where they had to become self-sufficient too soon. And in the safety of the therapeutic relationship, they could finally be dependent again. They could finally be needy, uncertain, vulnerable. They could finally be the child they never got to be. And the therapist would hold them through it, would not shame them for regressing, would not rush them to grow up, would simply allow them to be small again, to feel the feelings they never got to feel, to ask for the care they never got to ask for, to rest in dependence without fear of abandonment. And in that regression, something heals, not through insight, through experience, through being held in a way they never were as a child, through being allowed to need without being punished, through being dependent without being abandoned. And slowly, they begin to develop what they did not develop before: the capacity to be alone without terror, the capacity to need without shame, the capacity to be real without fear. This is not regression in the pathological sense. It is regression in the service of growth, going back to go forward, revisiting the developmental stage that was skipped and finally completing it. But regression requires trust. Deep, complete trust that the therapist will not leave, that they will not exploit the vulnerability, that they will not shame the need, that they will stay even when the person is at their most helpless. And for the person with a false self, that trust is almost impossible, because they have learned that dependence equals danger, that need equals abandonment, that vulnerability equals rejection. And so they resist regression. They stay controlled. They stay adult. They stay self-sufficient. Even in therapy, even in the one place where it might be safe to let go, because the fear is too deep. And Winnicott understood this. He did not force regression. He did not push. He simply created a space where it could happen if the person felt safe enough. And he waited, sometimes for months, sometimes for years, until the person felt safe enough to risk it, to risk being small, to risk being needy, to risk being held. And when they finally did, when they finally let themselves collapse into dependence, the healing began. You may have never allowed yourself to regress. You may have spent your entire life being the strong one, the one who holds it together, the one who takes care of everyone else, the one who never falls apart. And you may be exhausted, because strength is not the same as invulnerability. Strength is the capacity to be vulnerable and not collapse, to need and not be destroyed by the need, to fall apart and trust that you will be put back together. But you cannot learn that without regressing, without allowing yourself to be helpless just for a moment, without letting someone else hold you while you cannot hold yourself. And that is terrifying, because what if they leave? What if they cannot handle it? What if you finally let go and there is no one there to catch you? But here is what Winnicott would say: you cannot heal without risk. You cannot learn trust without trusting. You cannot discover that someone will stay unless you give them the chance to leave. And yes, Some people will leave, but some people will stay. And those are the people who can hold you while you heal. Tonight, you do not need to regress. You just need to feel the exhaustion of never regressing, of always being strong, always being adult, always being self-sufficient. And notice how tired you are, and ask yourself quietly, what would it feel like to let someone else carry me for once? Chapter 31, Learning to Feel. Real Winnicott said that the deepest fear of the false self is this, that if you become real, you will be annihilated, not metaphorically. It feels literal. If I let go of the mask, I will cease to exist. Because the mask has been there for so long that you do not remember what is beneath it. And so, becoming real feels like dying. But it is the opposite. The full self is already a kind of death. It is living at a distance from yourself, going through the motions, performing, existing but not being alive, and becoming real is not death. It is resurrection. It is the part of you that has been buried coming back to life. But it does not feel that way at first. At first, it feels terrifying, because you have built your entire life around the false self. Your relationships are built around it, your identity is built around it, your sense of safety is built around it. And if you let it go, you do not know what will remain. Will anyone still love me if I am not the easy one? Will I still know who I am if I am not the helpful one? Will I still have value if I am not the perfect one? These are not abstract questions. They feel like life or death. And so you cling to the false self, even though it is killing you, because the known suffering feels safer than the unknown freedom. But Winnicott would gently say, the annihilation you fear has already happened. You have already been annihilated by the false self. The real you has been buried for so long that it feels like it does not exist. But it does exist. It is still there, still waiting, still hoping. And learning to feel real is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering who you were before you learned to perform. And that remembering happens slowly, in small moments, the first time you say no without apologizing, the first time you express anger without shutting down, the first time you ask for help without feeling ashamed, the first time you let someone see you cry. These moments feel huge, terrifying, dangerous. But they are not dangerous. They are real. And each time you risk realness and survive, each time you let someone see you and they do not leave, the false self loosens its grip. Not because you are forcing it, but because it is no longer needed. You are learning that you can be real and still be safe, that you can be yourself and still be loved, that your worth is not contingent on your performance. And slowly, the true self comes forward. Not perfect, not polished, not impressive, just real, spontaneous, messy, alive. And that aliveness is what you have been searching for all along. Not achievement, not approval, not perfection, just the feeling of being fully present in your own life, of inhabiting your own body, your own feelings, your own experience, without editing, without apologizing, without performing. That is what it means to feel real, and tonight you can take one small step toward it. Not a dramatic gesture, just a moment of honesty, a moment where you admit just to yourself what you actually feel, not what you should feel, not what would make things easier, but what is actually here. Fear, anger, sadness, exhaustion, need. That feeling is real, and you are allowed to have it. Chapter 32. Self-worth beyond performance. Self-worth is not something you build. It is something you remember you were born with. Worth. Every infant is born with inherent value simply by existing. But then the world begins to teach you otherwise. You learn that your worth is conditional, that you must earn love, prove value, perform worthiness, and you spend your life trying to build something you already had. Winnicott understood this. He saw that the adults who struggled with self-worth were often the ones who had been praised for their achievements, but not loved for their being. They were valued for what they did, not who they were. And so they learned that their worth was external, contingent on performance, on productivity, on usefulness. And they became addicted to achievement, not because they loved achieving, but because achieving was the only way they knew how to feel valuable. And so they worked harder, accomplished more, took on more responsibility. And each success brought a brief moment of relief. See, I am worthy. But the relief never lasted, because no external validation can replace an internal sense of worth. You cannot achieve your way into self-worth. You cannot perform your way into feeling enough. You can only remember that you were always enough, that your worth was never the problem. The problem was that you were taught to doubt it, and now, as an adult, you carry that doubt like a stone. You measure your value by your productivity. You feel worthless when you are resting. You apologize for taking up space. You downplay your needs and amplify your contributions. And beneath all of that is a quiet terror. What if I am not actually valuable? What if everything I have built is just a house of cards? What if people see through me and realize I am not impressive at all? But here is what Winnicott would say. Your worth is not up for debate. It was given to you at birth, and nothing you have done or failed to do has taken it away. You do not need to earn it. You do not need to prove it. You just need to remember it. And that remembering is not intellectual. You cannot think your way into self-worth. You can only feel your way there. Through small moments of self-compassion. Through allowing yourself to rest without earning it. Through saying no without guilt. Through asking for help without apologizing. Through existing without justifying your existence. These are not grand gestures. They are quiet acts of rebellion against the lie that you are not enough. And each time you choose self-worth over performance, each time you let yourself be imperfect and do not collapse, you are remembering something true, that your value is not contingent, that you are worthy simply because you exist, that you do not need to do anything to deserve care, rest, or love. You already deserve it. You always have. Tonight, let that land, not as an idea, as a feeling. You are worthy. Not because you achieved something today, not because you helped someone, not because you were productive or useful or impressive, but because you are here, breathing, alive, human, and that is enough. Chapter 33, Intimacy without disguise. Intimacy is not the same as closeness. You can be physically close to someone and still be completely hidden. You can share a bed, a home, a life, and still be alone. Because intimacy requires realness. It requires letting someone see you without the mask, without the performance, without the disguise. And for the person with a false self, that feels impossible, because they have spent their entire life believing that the real them is unlovable, that the only acceptable version is the polished one, the competent one, the easy one, the one that never needs too much. And so they bring that version into every relationship, and they wonder why they feel lonely even when they are not alone. It is because no one sees them. They see the performance. They love the mask. But the person inside is unseen, unknown, unloved, and that is unbearable. Winnicott understood that intimacy without realness is not intimacy at all. It is cohabitation, companionship, partnership, but not intimacy. Because intimacy requires vulnerability. It requires showing someone your fear, your anger, your need. It requires letting them see you fail, see you struggle, see you imperfect, and trusting that they will stay. But that trust is terrifying, because you have been rejected for being real before, and so you do not risk it again. You stay behind the mask, and you hope that someday someone will see through it. That someone will notice you are performing and invite you to stop. But that rarely happens, because most people are also performing. Most people are also hiding behind their own masks. And so you have two people living side by side, both longing to be seen, but neither willing to risk being real. And the loneliness persists. You may recognize this in your own relationships. The way you edit yourself around your partner, the way you do not express your needs because you do not want to be too much, the way you perform happiness even when you are struggling, the way you would rather suffer in silence than risk being a burden. That is not intimacy. That is survival. And you deserve more than survival. You deserve to be known, to be loved, not despite your imperfection, but including it. To have someone see you at your worst and say, "I am still here." But that cannot happen if you never let anyone in, if you never take off the mask, if you never risk being real. And yes, some people will leave. Some people cannot handle your realness. But those are not your people. Your people are the ones who stay, the ones who see you messy and do not flinch, the ones who hold you through your struggle and do not need you to be strong, the ones who love you not for what you do, but for who you are. And the only way to find those people is to risk being real. Tonight, you do not have to take off the mask with someone else. You just have to take it off with yourself. You just have to admit, just to yourself, what you have been hiding: the need, the fear, the anger, the loneliness. And notice that even with all of that present, you are still here, still worthy, still lovable, still real. And maybe someday you will let someone else see that too. Chapter 34, Solitude without Emptiness. There is a difference between being alone and being lonely. Being alone is a state. Being lonely is a feeling. And Winnicott understood that the capacity to be alone, truly alone, without terror, is one of the markers of emotional health. The person who can sit in silence without needing distraction, who can be with themselves without feeling empty, who can rest in solitude without feeling abandoned. That person has internalized a sense of safety. They do not need external validation to feel okay. They do not need constant stimulation to avoid their own mind. They can simply be, and that is enough. But the person with a false self cannot do this. For them, being alone feels like annihilation, because when there is no one to perform for, they do not know who they are. When there is no external validation, they feel worthless. When there is no distraction, they are left with the emptiness they have been running from. And so they fill every moment. They reach for their phone, they turn on the TV, they make plans, they stay busy, not because they love being busy, but because stillness feels dangerous. Because in stillness, there is no performance, and without performance, they fear they will disappear. But Winnicott would say that this fear is backwards. It is the performance that is making them disappear, the constant doing, the constant achieving, the constant presenting. That is what is erasing them. And solitude is not emptiness. It is space. Space to remember who you are beneath the doing. Space to feel what you have been avoiding. Space to hear the quiet voice that has been drowned out by the noise. And learning to be alone without terror is how you reclaim yourself. Not through more activity, through stillness. Not through more achievement, through rest. Not through more connection, through solitude. And that solitude is not selfish. It is necessary, because you cannot know who you are if you never spend time with yourself. You cannot hear your own voice if you never let it speak. You cannot feel your own feelings if you are always managing everyone else's. Tonight, you are alone, not lonely, alone. And maybe that feels uncomfortable. Maybe you want to reach for your phone, turn on something, fill the space. But what if you did not? What if you just sat with the discomfort? What if you let the emptiness be there without rushing to fill it, and noticed that beneath the emptiness something else is waiting? Not more emptiness, but aliveness. The quiet hum of your own existence, the steady rhythm of your breath, the presence of yourself without anyone else. And maybe that is enough. Maybe you do not need anyone else to validate your existence. Maybe you are enough on your own, not forever, not in every moment, but right now, tonight. You are here, and that is not nothing. Chapter 35, Rest After Overadaptation. For most of your life, you have been adapting, adjusting, performing, managing, becoming what others need you to be. And you have done it so well that you forgot it was adaptation. You thought it was just who you are, the helpful one, the responsible one, the easy one. But it was never who you are. It was who you had to become to survive. And now, decades later, you are exhausted. Not from doing too much, though you have done too much, but from being someone you are not. From living at a distance from yourself. From performing a role that no longer fits, if it ever did. And Winnicott would say that this exhaustion is not weakness. It is your true self finally saying, enough. Enough pretending, enough performing, enough adapting. I need to rest. And rest is not the same as sleep. Sleep can restore your body, but it cannot restore yourself. Rest means stopping the performance, letting the mask down, letting yourself be imperfect, letting yourself need. Rest means admitting that you are tired of being admirable, that you would rather be real than impressive, that you are done sacrificing yourself to keep everyone else comfortable. And that admission is terrifying, because you have built your entire life around being the one who holds it together. And if you stop, what happens? Will people still love you? Will they still need you? Will you still matter? These are not abstract questions. They feel existential. But here is what Winnicott would say. If people only love you when you are performing, they do not love you. They love your service. And you deserve more than that. You deserve to be loved for who you are, not what you do. And the only way to find out who loves you for real is to stop performing, to let yourself rest, to let yourself be imperfect, to let yourself be human. And yes, some people will leave. Some people only wanted the easy version. But the people who stay, the people who see you rest and do not judge you, those are your people, and they are worth the risk. Tonight, let yourself rest, not from activity, from adaptation. Let yourself stop monitoring, stop managing, stop performing. Let your face be neutral, your body be heavy, your mind be quiet. You do not owe anyone your energy right now. You do not owe anyone a performance. You are allowed to simply exist, tired, imperfect, real. And notice that even in that realness, even without the mask, you are still here, still worthy, still whole, still enough. And maybe that is what rest actually is. Not the absence of activity, but the presence of yourself. Chapter 36. A quiet return to realness. We began with a child sitting at the edge of a prone room, watching, waiting, learning that love was conditional, learning that the only safe version of themselves was the compliant one. And we have walked through what that child became. The adult who performs, who adapts, who carries everyone else's comfort. The adult who is exhausted, lonely, and unsure who they are beneath the mask. But here is what Winnicott understood. The true self does not disappear. It waits. And healing is not about becoming someone new. It is about returning to who you were before. You learned to perform. Before you learned that your realness was too much. Before you learned that need equals danger. Before you learned to be easy at the cost of being yourself. That return is not dramatic. It is quiet. It happens in small moments. The first time you say no without guilt. The first time you express anger without shutting down. The first time you ask for help without apologizing. The first time you let someone see you cry and you do not collapse into shame. These moments feel insignificant, but they are not. They are the true self coming forward, one breath at a time, one risk at a time. And each time you risk realness and survive, each time you let someone see you and they do not leave, the false self loses its grip, not because you forced it, but because it is no longer needed. You are learning that you can be real and still be safe, that your needs are not too much, that your anger is not dangerous, that your worth is not contingent on your performance. And slowly, you remember what you always knew, that you are enough, not because you achieved something, not because you helped someone, but because you exist, and existence is enough. Tonight, you do not need to fix yourself. You do not need to become someone new. You just need to remember. The child who had to adapt is still inside you. And that child deserves recognition, deserves care, deserves rest. And maybe tonight you can offer them what they needed back then. Not perfection, not answers, just presence. The willingness to sit with them in their fear, to hold them through their anger, to stay with them in their loneliness, to say quietly, I see you, I am here, and I am not going anywhere. That is not therapy, that is not insight, that is love, the love you never received, the love you have been searching for. And maybe you do not need to search anymore. Maybe it was always here, waiting inside you, waiting for you to stop performing long enough to notice. Let your breath slow. Feel your body. Feel the weight of yourself, not as a burden, but as proof. Proof that you are here, that you made it through, that you survived. And survival is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of living, not performing, not adapting, not earning, just living as yourself. Imperfect, real, alive. And that is enough. It has always been enough. Sleep now.